Hey everybody, this is, I guess, the third in the series of videos that I'm doing for E3. Um, Today I cover all of the press conferences on day 2 except Square Enix, because if I covered Square Enix it would probably take me way too long. So we'll cover everything up to Square Enix and do Square Enix with Nintendo whenever I post the next one up, which will probably be later tonight. So, we'll go ahead and start with the PC Gaming Showcase. The last couple of years, the year before last, I didn't watch the PC Gaming Showcase because I thought it was silly. Last year I went ahead and watched it, and it was okay. But this year, I decided watch the whole thing. It's not the, I think it was like 3 hours last year. Whatever it was, I thought it was way too long last year. But, I digress. Watched it this year. Well, I'll go through some of the highlight titles that showed up that interest me, or interest the majority of people, I suppose. So let's go ahead and start off. So first, the Vampire, the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 had a new trailer to show. Game's still early in development. I believe it's supposed to be coming out early next year. Not much to talk about there. There's just some light gameplay trailers for it. Starmancer, game being published by Cuttlefish. So it's been described to me, because it's kind of hard to figure out what exactly the game is, but it's been described as RimWorld meets Dwarf Fortress in space. I think there's a few people that would be interested in a title that did those things, so if you are, go ahead and throw it up on your watch later list on Steam. Cuttlefish has been known for publishing some really cool indie titles and giving a lot of publicity to those devs, so anything that comes out of them is usually worth looking at. Chivalry 2 was shown, supports 64 player play and mounted combat. Chivalry was a pretty kind of well-like-ished title. I think a lot of people like that game. I wouldn't know. I never played it, but it seemed there was a lot of interest towards it, so thought I'd bring it up. Midnight Ghost Hunt, a 4v4 action game where you either play as ghost hunters or ghosts, and ghost hunters have to capture the ghosts. Ghosts have to last till midnight and then go attack all the ghost hunters. It got a lot of press at C3. It's still getting a lot of press at the C3. I'm not quite sure why, but seems to be thought pretty highly of by those who have played it or are at E3. Unexplored 2 was revealed, sequel to the old I shouldn't say old, but the previous roguelike explorer game. If you liked Unexplored, or you like roguelikes, or you like exploring games, probably an interesting game for you. Here's a funny one. So, last April Fool's, Conan Chop Chop was announced. It was a joke game. It was basically Castle Crashers Conan in a Conan world made to be like a Zelda game. Yeah, that got so much publicity they decided to make it an actual game. I don't have anything else to say. It's happening. Age of Wonder Planetfall. It's a 4X game. If you like 4X games, you'll probably like this game. People who like 4X games tend to play all 4X games. There's no 4X game that a 4X game player won't play. So, if you like 4X games, look at Age of Wonder Planetfall. Seems it's sci-fi themed. A little bit of fantasy themed. It's kind of all over the place from what I saw, so. Which is a guiding principle of 4X games, in my opinion. Shenmue 3 was shown. And then it was announced it was going to be a Epic Game Store exclusive, and the internet exploded. Because apparently we cannot have games being launched on exclusive launchers anymore. And the internet exploded. Then it exploded. And it exploded. Most of the people who are angry are people who backed the game on Kickstarter. They backed it expecting that they would be getting the game on Steam, while completely not understanding the fact that the authors have they really have no reason to actually give you that. There's nothing preventing them from actually just pulling that back outside losing some pride and dignity, which, if you're after the Epic Game Store money, is probably worthwhile, I guess. I don't really have a dog in this race. I think people are just being upset over something stupid, like having to use a second launcher in life. Whatever. Like, I play on consoles. Like, you're all a bunch of idiots. Next, Vermintide 2 Versus was announced. 4v4 asymmetric PvP mode for the ever-popular Vermintide series. I haven't played Vermintide. I know it's really popular, so enjoy that. It's basically Left 4 Dead competitive. And I mean all of the Dota auto chess was announced. There was like 3 different Dota auto chess games, if I am correct. So Dota on Underlords, which isn't officially announced, but is been leaked pretty much everywhere possible. It's going to be Valve's Dota auto chess game. There's nothing official on that. It's just everywhere I look, I see a leak coming out for it. I'm surprised they didn't actually announce it at this E3. Riot announced Teamfight Tactics, which they outright said is their Dota auto chess game for League. That came as a surprise. I didn't know they were working on one. But more to a surprise, I believe it's the guy who actually developed Dota Auto Chess is releasing Auto Chess, an actual like separate independent game, on the Epic Game Store. Cool. If you like Dota Auto Chess, well, you're gonna have more Dota Auto Chess than you ever wanted in your life. Chris Tales was announced. They're claiming it's like a throwback to classic JRPGs. Seem to have an interesting theme between being able to view the past, present, and future. There wasn't much to say about it. A lot of people said it reminded them of Child of Light. I kind of saw that. It's a very bright game, same way as Child of Light's kind of a very bright game, but it's coming out for a whole bunch of different systems. If you like your JRPGs, it's one to keep an eye out on. Gearbox brought a new trailer for Borderlands 3. Not much else happened. Terraria Journey's End was announced because the developers of Terraria constantly try to find themselves working on something else, get bored, and then go back to making more Terraria content, despite the fact they said they're never going to release any more Terraria content. Anyway, there's going to be a ton more Terraria content for you if you like your Terraria and you feel like you haven't put enough time in Terraria, which I know a lot of people who have put over 300 hours in Terraria, which is way too much time to put into a single game, as I sit here and play in Destiny. Baldur's Gate 3 showed up. Not much to talk about. It's Baldur's Gate's everywhere right now, and there's not much to talk about on the new Baldur's Gate title, outside the fact that it's being developed by Larian Studios, which is a good studio to pick it up. So my overall thoughts on the PC gaming show. It's usually something I'm already down on, because I don't think there's usually that much interesting that actually comes out of it. But this time, you know what? It was pretty good. I give credit. It was well organized. Last year, I thought a lot of the titles were on stage for way too long. They kind of kept it rapid fire. Which was both a positive and kind of a negative. More positive to me because I like being able to see all the titles rather than one title I'm not interested in for 20 minutes. But it would have been nice to have a few more gameplay trailers. There really was not a lot of gameplay trailers shown. It was mostly, here's a cinematic trailer, let's talk about the game for a couple minutes and move on to the next game. I thought that really hurt a lot of like the big titles. Like, you have Baldur's Gate 3 there, you have Borderlands 3 there. They probably deserved a little more time and could have actually shown some gameplay to their games. Just kind of my thought. But that's about it for the PC gaming show. It was a plus year for the PC gaming show, I do say. Did really well to impress me with a lot of the titles and the great variety that they showed. Next, we'll spend a little bit of time here. The limited run games press conference. So, for those of you who don't know, limited run games, they make physical copies of usually digitally only games. That's basically their bread and butter. So they'll make really low print runs, games you can download digitally for people who like to collect their games. I regularly buy games off them because I'm kind of a collector myself. And if you like money, you could pretty much resell all of their games for way too much money. It's just a tip from me to you. But yeah, when I say low print run, most of the games I believe they're around like 3,000 copies that they print. So when they get a really popular game, it tends to sell out like really quickly, and that's kind of something that really hurt them early on. But they've gotten better at planning those print runs. Anyway, we'll go through some of these pretty quickly. Kind of the big thing that they were getting at, they didn't really outright say it, but you could tell they were kind of saying it. We're getting to the end of the cycle for Weta-based games. There was a big hubbub about 6 months ago that Sony was really cutting down on the print runs for Weta cartridges. So there was a very limited supply of cartridges to make runs for Weta games. Well, apparently what happened then was limited run games kind of just took all of them. A bunch of studios canceled Weta runs for their games, and Limited Run Games bought all of them and is doing limited run print runs for a lot of those games. So whereas those games would have had probably closer to 10K runs, now they're getting like 3K runs, and Limited Run Games now gets the opportunity to make print runs for some of the other games they have. But anyway, back to the point, Sony's cutting down on a lot of these, is what it sounds like. This will probably be the last year of Weta runs that I think you're going to be seeing for a while. So, let's get down to the actual announcements. The Atari collection. So Atari has a handful of games that they released on the Nintendo 3DS shop. Limited Run Games, they're making their first ever 3DS cartridge run, and it's going to be just a collection of games from that company. The games aren't that interesting to me, but the fact that they now have a method of doing a print run on 3DS is quite interesting, because the 3DS store has a ton of games that got zero press that are probably worth getting print runs for. So we'll keep our eye on that. Some other titles, Blaster Master Zero is getting a print run. So if you like your Blaster Master games, it's getting a print run. Here's a fun one. So last year, they announced at E3 that they had procured the rights to do print runs on old Sega CD games. You know, remember those old full motion video Sega CD games? Well, last year they did a print run on Night Trap. Which is about the most hilarious game you could print in this era. I can't explain Night Trap. You just have to go watch and see these horrible FMV games. Like, this is, like, I'm talking pre-Command and Conquer era. Well, actually, maybe it was around Command and Conquer era. It was probably close to Command and Conquer era. Back when Command and Conquer was doing these, like, cringy FMV videos. Well, there were other games that were doing the same thing, but they were on Sega CD. But I digress. So last year they did Night Trap. This year they're releasing Corpse Killer and Double Switch. So they're going to get limited print runs. It'll probably be some of their bigger sellers, because I believe Night Trap did explosive for them, because all Night Trap. Other games that interest me, Damascus Gear Operation Osaka and Tokyo. Freedom Planet, that was an interesting announcement. Freedom Planet's been out for a while, I think. But Freedom Planet's kind of like a Sonic-like game with 3 different characters, so it's like 3 different ways to play. Guacamelee is getting a print run on Weta. Night in the Woods getting a print run. I know that game is super popular, so if you like Night in the Woods, there you go. Papers, Please. Not surprising. Papers, Please was kind of like a breakout hit in the IndieWare game for being this absurdly dystopian, bureaucratic nightmare of a game. Yeah, Real Mist is getting a print run. Probably a big coup for limited run games. They're going to be the exclusive provider of the Shimio 3 print collector's edition print run. That's a big win for them. That's a big. I'm surprised they got that. To be honest, a whole bunch of Star Wars games right now, and this kind of made a big hubbub because they basically put out a montage video of a whole bunch of old LucasArts Star Wars games, and everyone thought that there was going to be this mega collection of ancient Star Wars video games. No, they're going to release them all out independently, one by one, which, I mean, makes more sense from a limited print run game standard, limited run games position. But it was a little disheartening because everyone kind of saw the montage and they were like, oh, we're going to get all these games in one package, but we're only going to get them one at a time. They announced a few. I believe Bounty Hunter is going to be getting one soon. One of the old ones on Game Boy is actually getting a run, I believe, on Game Boy. So that's that on that. Super Meat Boy's getting a run. Big one. Transistor is getting a print run. Now, for those of you who collect games like me, you might want to get that one because that's a pretty big game. It's a pretty popular game. You might want to get a copy of that when it goes on sale on limited run games. Just saying. Just an idea. Just saying. Just saying, guys. And lastly, Turok and Turok 2. They're going to get a print run from limited run games. That was a pretty surprising one to me, but that about covers limited run games. Good set of releases from them. If you like collecting games, you'll like limited run games. Anyway, next press conference, Ubisoft. So Ubisoft, I went in kind of questioning how significant their press conference was going to be, and it came out to be about what I expected. So we'll go ahead and start off. They opened off with Watch Dogs 3 Legion, which they announced for a release date as March 2020. So it turns out the game's pretty much exactly what was leaked. It takes place in London in a Brexit dystopia, some X amount of years in the future. I think more important than this Brexit dystopia is that it's a surveillance state now, which is, if you follow British politics, has been kind of a big talking point that's gone under the water since Brexit's kind of the current big talking point. But for those of you who don't know, Britain's trying to put in like significant surveillance equipment throughout their major hubs, major cities, and there's been a lot of pushback from a lot of different groups about it, but it was kind of the direction that it seemed like was inevitable. So, but coming back to the game, takes place in the Brexit dystopia. We all should take a moment and laugh and say that Ubisoft doesn't do political games. If you're wondering what I'm memeing about, at the release of Division 2, the game director, I believe it was the game director, came out and said that Ubisoft doesn't do political-based games, despite the fact they're doing a game under the Tom Clancy label, which was total ironic. For those who don't really know, Ubisoft has made it a point to be a pretty political studio. They're very liberal. They're a very liberal game studio. And it shows in a lot of their works. They may not always tell very liberal stories, but everything's kind of painted in a liberal view. Like, if you don't think Assassin's Creed is a liberal game, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, so some facts about the game. There's no main character. It's a set of recruitable NPCs. So you don't play as a single character. You play as multiple characters that are part of a team that you assemble. They had like 25 minutes of gameplay. It was a huge amount of gameplay to watch. it all looked super impressive to me. The only downside of that is all the Watch Dogs games regularly look super impressive to me. Ubisoft's done a very good job at painting their gameplay trailers for the Watch Dogs franchise to be very good, very entertaining, and make it look like games that you just need to buy. And then when you get the game doesn't turn out as you expected. It doesn't meet the level of it just doesn't meet your expectations. This game has a huge scope to it. Being able to recruit any character, any NCP, and being able to push a coherent story with this random collection of characters, that's a pretty significant scope in my opinion. The possibility of not meeting those expectations feels really high. So while Watch Dogs 3 was really impressive in terms of what they showed at E3, I am also incredibly wary because we've been burned with Watch Dogs multiple times in not meeting the expectations, and they've put a scope forward for this particular game that seems quite exquisite. And I gotta scratch my ear. Itch. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next game. Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Just a slight trailer. I believe at E3 there's some playable version. The game is in some playable state at E3. I don't know what to say because I haven't actually seen a lot of gameplay footage for it yet. Then they did. Oh my god. So Just Dance 2020 is coming out. We should all just expect it. We should all expect the choreographed dance number every Ubisoft E3. It's coming out for the Wii again because we're all insane, and Ubisoft is incredibly dedicated to keeping that system alive for the next 20 years. Next, they announced Rainbow Six Quarantine. So, my perspective on what I saw here, it looks like they're taking the tool set that they have from Rainbow Six Siege and turning that same tool set around to release a co-op horror game. They specifically gave it a very survival horror theme to it, but it's supposed to be a co-op game, playable with up to two other. I think it's 3-player co-op, so up to 2 other friends. I'll be honest, this is actually a very smart idea from Ubisoft to take a franchise that they already have, that's already popular, take a lot of the tools from that franchise, and then rehash that franchise into a spin-off of something that's entirely new and unique. If it is like a survival horror game, it's a good way to bring new fans into the franchise and get fans of the franchise to go out and buy another game that's part of the franchise, even though that game is not the same as what they've previously played. I think it's a good idea. I think what would be even more interesting is if they've rehashed the whole tool so much that it's not even a full price game. Then I imagine it would sell like hotcakes. Next, showed some of the stuff they had planned for Division 2. I haven't picked up Division 2. I'm not sure I really will. But they have a new raid coming out in the fall, and later on, I was unclear about this, but in their last content update that they plan on doing for this year, or in next year's content update, we're going to be going back to New York to go after, I believe his name was Aiden Pierce, like the OG rogue agent that basically starts the Division, the events of the Division, if I recall correctly. Next, they announced a subscription service because we cannot have an E3 press conference without announcing a new subscription service. That's become quite clear to me. Anyway, for only $15 a month, starting in September, I believe, you can get every single Ubisoft game and all the DLC for it ever. I'm going to go ahead and just vomit at that price when $15 is a lot of money per month for just Ubisoft games. That's too much. That's too much money, especially when you compare it to a lot of other similar services. Most notably, that Google Stadia just did Google Stadia Pro for $10 a month, and you don't even need any hardware or anything. Yeah. That price point's just terrible, in my opinion. Next, they announced Roller Champions, which is a game currently in demo. I think just for this week. I think it's just like a demo for this week. Anyway, it's a sports game, roller derby, kind of like a lead-up Battle Angel. It's kind of how I viewed it. So, my 2 cents on this particular game. This is Ubisoft trying to make their own Rocket League kind of explosive sports game, which is a niche that really isn't well filled. I could see this being a good idea. Most of the reports I've read, because I haven't seen a lot of gameplay footage on it yet, is that it's really fun, that people who play it really enjoy it. Now, I can say the same thing about Rocket League. When I played Rocket League, I played it and I really enjoyed it, and I haven't played it in probably about 2-3 years. It was easy to pick up, easy to put down, easy to play, hard to master, which is a truism for games that become esports. I think the one thing that's important to note here is part of what made Rocket League so successful and what caused it to blow up the way it did was Rocket League was one of a handful of titles that was first to go on PSN Plus for free. And they created a huge fan base just from that. That was incredible for that game, because what people don't realize was that Rocket League has a prequel. There was a game that was before Rocket League. It was like something explosive car. It had an absurd, hysterical name, and it's literally the exact same game. But they later then went back and decided they'd remake that game up, whereas that previous game didn't. Now, that previous game didn't get the free play on PSN. It didn't get that free marketing lever. I don't know if Ubisoft has the ability to get that kind of output. I don't know if this game's going to be free to play. I don't know what kind of marketing spin they're going to do to make this game the next Rocket League. We'll have to see. Seems like it's a game that's interesting people. I don't know what else to say there. Lastly, they showed a trailer for Gods and Monsters. So this game is being developed by, I believe it's the Montreal studio for Ubisoft. So it's the studio that did the most recent Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So it seems like they're pulling from that, and they're making a kind of open world 3D Zelda-like game. I say Zelda-like because it's kind of more of a childish animation. Very bright, very bright. I like my games when they're really bright. Style action adventure kind of open world game. So my thought here is this is an interesting game. That style of like bright 3D open world Zelda action adventure game is pretty much held exclusively by Zelda. There aren't too many of those. They were kind of a dime a dozen years and years ago in the PS2, GameCube, Xbox era. There was a whole bunch of them, but I think the market kind of just got flooded and they stopped. Those weren't even really that open world anyway. But this is potential. It's a new announcement. It's coming out next spring. So I got my eye on it. It very much interests me. But that's about it. It's not about it. That's pretty much it for Ubisoft. My overall thoughts was that I think first and foremost, Ubisoft was hurt pretty hard by all the leaks. Most of these titles everyone kind of already knew about, so there wasn't much surprise. I think I hadn't heard about Gods and Monsters before, but I know a lot of people had already play tested it before E3 happened, so it was kind of already out there. Well, maybe in there. It wasn't out, it was already in. Whatever. But yeah, having all their stuff leaked, especially the Watch Dogs leak, was pretty rough. It kind of hampered all the surprise that we had for Watch Dogs 3. That said, Watch Dogs 3 was still a big announcement. Like I said, it's a game that has a significant scope and will probably get a lot of interest from this E3 based on how interesting and how unique the game looked. I think I'd have to do a hard count. I think there was about 4 or 5 Tom Clancy games. It was a lot of Tom Clancy games. Maybe we'll get more Tom Clancy games, because there's a lot of Tom Clancy games at their E3 this year. Gods and Monsters, interesting game. Kind of a more cartoony, childish version of Witcher 3, maybe. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That's what I would hope to see out of that game. There was just try to see some more gameplay footage on it whenever I get a chance. As for my so what's up, there was nothing for Beyond Good and Evil 2, which has been at the Ubisoft press conference for 2 years in a row now. Mildly distressing. I believe they do some kind of vidoc monthly or bi-monthly for that game, but I'm gonna be honest, that game's been in the works for so long I kind of expected a release date. And didn't even get a trailer. That's rough. Yeah, that's rough. Also along those same lines, Skull and Bones. So, I mean, this title goes back like at least 3 years. This game is in a pretty rough development hell, it seems like. But I believe like 3 years ago it was announced at E3. It no-showed the following E3, came back revived at the next E3, and it's no-showing E3 again. I believe it was at last year's E3. It was at last year's E3, it's kind of revived, got the title Skull and Bones, and then disappeared, and was not at this E3. That's a bad sign, man. That's not a good sign. It's not a good sign when a game no-shows E3 after being announced, like, what, 4 years ago? It's kind of a... Yeah, it's not good. Not good. So it was kind of a meh press conference from Ubisoft. They hit their big title, Watch Dogs 3, and it really did hit pretty big, in my opinion. But, their missing in actions were particularly noticeable to me. Alright, so last press conference I'll cover in this video, Kinda Funny Games. So Kinda Funny Games was a little bit nutty. They had like 60 indie titles that they went through in like 40 minutes. So I was literally about 35 minutes through the video and I was like, I probably should have been taking notes on some of this. So I went back, started it over again, and started taking notes because I didn't expect to be shotgunned this much by actually interesting indie titles. Which I should know better. At my age, indie titles interest me almost even more than AAA titles. But I digress. Moving on. So, One Night Stand, it's a title already out. It's a animated visual novel about having a one night stand. It's coming to consoles. That was the announcement. Standby, it's a I'd call it. It's a high-speed platformer that clearly looks like its main interest is drawing the speedrunning community. Because it's a lot of platforming at high speeds. So, pretty much made for speedrunning. Falcon Age, VR game with Falcon Bro. Was announced, I don't know when that was announced. That was announced a while back, but they had a new trailer for it. It's pretty much the same game. It's a VR game. You have Falcon Bro on your arm. You tell Falcon Bro to do things. He does things. And he's a Falcon Bro. You can pet him on the head. Battle Wake, that was actually announced earlier in the day in the VR showcase that I decided not to cover because there were no interesting titles on it besides really this one. But Battle Wake, pirate ship combat, VR, seemed like it was more interested in being a co-op game than a PvP game. very fantasy setting. It wasn't like very realistic pirate, and like you summon a kraken that attacks other ships. So it was more fantasy than it was pirates. Trigger Witch, very short little gameplay trail of it. It's a top-down twin-stick shooter in like a Zelda fantasy realm where you play a witch with a bunch of guns. Seemed interesting. I like my Zelda-like games, so when you have like a twin-stick Zelda-like game, that's cool. It's really cool. Etherborn, I'm reading my notes word for word here. Innovative platform puzzler about defying gravity and visual illusions. This seemed to make a lot of people's list from the showcase. Kind of pretty interesting style of gameplay. It seemed to be more puzzle platform. Next, Undermine, a mining-based roguelike. It kind of stuck to me. It was like the theme wasn't like battling monsters all the time. It was like it's mining and there's monsters there. Damn it, screen, stay up. Summer Catchers. So I'm assuming this is kind of like Cruising USA to cool music. I really don't know what was happening in this game, but like I'd like to point out, it really had some cool music. Next, this was one of, so I had a handful of highlights in the showcase. This was one of them. Police Stories. It seemed to be stylized as Hotline Miami, but instead of being like a guy running on a rampage killing everyone in sight, you instead play the role of a cop, and a pair of cops really. And it seemed to be like a slower, more tactical version of Hotline Miami. They're promoting like a big story along with it. Yeah, this game was really cool and really interesting. And I threw it on my Steam watch list pretty much just because of that. Next, Brave Earth Prologue, from the studio of the team that did I Have to Be the Guy, I Need to Be the Guy, I Want to Be the Guy. I think that's what it was called. Anyway, the game's Castlevania. Stronghold Warlords. So, at first I wasn't sure whether or not this game was part of the Stronghold franchise. Turns out it is. Which is shocking, because I would have bet money that studio was gone. Because all the Stronghold games after Crusader are like shit. But, this game showed up in the press conference, had a neat art style. They're going for a more Asian theme instead of Crusader's European theme, so we'll see what happens with that game. Next, another game that made my Steam watch list, Half Past Fate. So it was titled A Rom-Com Adventure Across Time. I had to pause there. I don't know. That was kind of like an absurd premise for a game, but the art style was really cool. Kind of like a new age Earthbound style, bright art style, but like rom-com adventure. Yeah, that was an into my Steam wish list. Next, another one that was probably one of my bigger highlights during the press conference, Undying. So this was a like top-down game with huge like Last of Us vibes. So in this particular game, you play a mother who's trying to protect her son in a zombie apocalypse. So it's basically Last of Us, but instead of like being a third-person shooter, it's a top-down style game. Another game, Trials of Fire, which is like a card. I had to write this down. I had a question mark at the end. A card-based tabletop-themed tactical RPG. That's a lot of words. This game's already in early access, and you can play it. They were pimping that they have a new character, the Alchemist, you can play. But I haven't seen a game that's tried to do so much in a long time. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of people you hear card-based, and they're already running out the door. Next game, probably the highlight of the entire showcase, a title called Foregone. So just an action game that was very reminiscent of Dead Cells. probably what was most interesting about it was the character animation on this was pretty exquisite, especially for like a pixel game, pixel style game, pixel art. Um, yeah, the animation on that was so fluid and so impressive. It was hard not to make comparisons to Dead Cells. Um, but yeah, everyone should go throw that in their Steam watch list because that was an impressive looking title from what I saw. Lastly, from the showcase, Warborn, Mecha Tactical RPG. Like, you just said Mecha, you just said Tactical RPG, and it was like, yeah, you're free in my watch later list. So overall, that's all the interesting games I saw in the showcase. There's plenty more. Like I said, it was like 60 games in 40 minutes. I think they did this last year, and I skipped down on it because I was like, I have enough press conferences to handle. But I went ahead and I watched it this year. This was a really good showcase, a very good chance for indie devs to show their wares and maybe even get good publishing deals for their games. There was a lot more gameplay than there was in the PC gaming show. It was a very good showcase, and the people at Kind of Funny Games should be pretty proud of what they put together here. If you get a chance, I mentioned a bunch of games that you should probably keep an eye out for. If I said it during this, it was something that interests me, and you should probably at least take a look at. It was definitely one of the better showcases this E3. Well, anyway, I'm gonna cut this out here. So later tonight, I'll cover the Square Enix presser along with the Nintendo presser. I do the Square Enix one now, but I'd get this in over an hour, and I don't want this to be over an hour. So tomorrow we'll do Square Enix and Nintendo, and while I'm kind of recording this, the NIS America did a surprise press conference that I've kind of been ignoring, so I'll watch that before I make my post up for the Square Enix and Nintendo one if I want to add anything in there. So that's that. I'm going to end this video, post it up right now, and everyone can enjoy it. See y'all around. Peace.